Well, thank you. On behalf of members of the administration that are here and on behalf of our team that will be up here to bat last and bat 1,000 as they always do in terms of any Q&A and nuance and detail around the May revise, I'm grateful for the opportunity to update you on the fiscal health and economic condition of the state of California. And I will begin as we should. Dominance. That's the way to describe, in one word, the state of California. We simply have no peers. We are the tentpole of the American economy. Yes, we're the size of 21 state populations combined, but we dominate in every critical category. Number one in manufacturing, $405.6 billion a year in output. Agriculture, $62.1 billion a year in output. Innovation, come on. IPOs, venture capital, we're going to have 3 major IPOs later this calendar year. No one competes with the state of California, including on the issue of job creation. Just think about this. Since 2019, there is not a jurisdiction in the United States of America, not one of the 49 other states, that came close to outperforming the economy of the state of California. Our economy grew, a $3 trillion economy in 2019 to $4.25 trillion, grew by roughly 40% over the course of the last 7.5 or so years. We went from actually being number 2 in the number of Fortune 500 companies, and this is an updated talking point for the folks out there that are still stuck on the old talking points. We have more Fortune 500 companies than any other state in the nation, and more than we did many years ago, 49 to 58. We rank number 1 in terms of the number of Fortune 500 companies. You see here that validation in the headline from Fortune magazine, taking over that spot from New York and Texas. 2/3, and this is significant, of the investment in venture capital, which last year broke records, $106 billion. 2/3 of it are invested back in to California-based companies. That's an important stat. $106 billion record amount of investment in venture capital. That money's not flowing out of the state because the talent and the innovation and entrepreneurial spirit resides within the state. Here is a proof point of that. Just consider from 2019 to September of 2025, the number of business starts. They don't often talk about the number of businesses that start, the next Apple, the next Genentech. We have over 400 unicorn companies in the state of California. No one comes close. Those are the companies worth over $1 billion. California has no peers. We dominate in every one of these critical categories. And it's not just in the domestic construct. It's in a global construct as well. So much attention now being placed on China, so much attention that's been placed over the course of the last few weeks in the EU, particularly Germany, and some of the issues around the current administration in Washington's approach to global affairs. Put this in perspective. I referenced that 40% growth in California. Compare that since 2019. We have no peers in the developed world, not just in the other 49 states. You can see the United States, 15.1% growth, 40% growth in the state of California, 32 in China, 16 in Germany. What's interesting about Germany, what's interesting about China, and what's interesting about the United States is they have something else in common. We dominate in research and development. It's a formula for success. Our success is not by chance, it's by design. And research and development is foundational to the success of this state and our economy. 21% in China of the world's R&D, 20-ish in Germany, 18% of the world's research and development. Just here in one state, our state, the state of California. With respect to those with California derangement syndrome, it's time to update your talking points. And it's time to tell the truth to the American people. California dominates. We have no peers. With that, we also are mindful of the headwinds out of Washington, D.C. And those headwinds are pretty profound. They're pretty outsized, and they impact this state more than any other state in the nation by definition. As a tentpole of the U.S. economy, we're going to be impacted by those headwinds disproportionately. And we have a president who, well, now known, because it's been shared, that doesn't particularly give a damn about the financial situation of the average American. His words, not my words, not being unfair here. This is what he said before he took off to China. I don't think about, he said, honestly and openly, about America's financial situation. That would include, by definition, the 40 million Americans that happen to reside here in California. We've seen this president declare multiple wars in the last 15 or so months. He's declared war on innovation. We'll establish that. Certainly a war on affordability. And yes, of course, the war, not the excursion, the war in Iran. On the innovation front, you've seen the impacts already. These are his proposed cuts, that formula for success, pushing out the boundaries of discovery, partnerships in Sandia Labs, Lawrence Livermore Labs, Lawrence Berkeley Labs, all of that research and development. He wants to cut the National Institute of Health by 40%. He wants to cut the National Science Foundation by 57%. President Xi is celebrating Donald Trump's budget. No wonder he had a wonderful first day in China. $32 billion of grants he's looking to cut across all kinds of agencies within the United States. An attack and assault on the secret sauce that makes America great, not just the state of California. He's also going after our ability to get first-round draft choices. That formula for success is not just around research and development. It's also about getting the best and the brightest from around the rest of the world. You've seen the impacts in this country, but also in the state of California, not just undocumented, legal immigration. Our ability, again, to the best and the brightest. You saw what happened just in our state alone. The number of legal immigrants was cut in half because of the policies of the Trump administration, 220,000 down to 125 last year. You've seen some highlight headlines on that. Many of you have written it. Worker shortages across the spectrum. Ask folks in the Central Valley or in the Central Coast. Ask folks in the construction industry that are trying to rebuild Palisades and Altadena. Ask folks about what's going on in healthcare as it relates to the worker shortages because of the immigration policies of this administration impacting the economy of our state, not just the United States. H-1B visas across the spectrum equals slower growth and, yes, higher costs. Let's talk about those costs. You saw what he did beginning with those illegal tariffs. California was the first state to litigate on those illegal tariffs. We announced it in the Central Valley on a farm, talking about the impact those illegal tariffs would have on ranchers and farmers. Well, you've seen the impacts just in our state, $18.4 billion tax increase for people in the state of California, adds up to about $1,350 per family. You've seen exports drop 32% in the wine and spirits business. 32%. Talk about a wrecking ball. Not 3.2%, 32% because of the imposition. Ask the farmers, ask our friends growing pistachios and almonds, how are they doing? Down 64% in exports to China since Donald Trump got into office. That is a hell of a record. 46% increase, and that's a national number, of farm bankruptcies since he's become president. You can't even make this stuff up. This was Liberation Day. Remember, celebrating this great moment in American history? Well, you've seen the significant damage. And if you think it's overstated, let's remind ourselves, what was the whole argument for Liberation Day? It was to bring manufacturing back to the United States of America. Well, that's the scorecard. It's been a year and a half almost. Let's take a look. Since Liberation Day, 190,000, roughly, blue-collar jobs have been cut. Manufacturing jobs have been lost. This wasn't easy to do. What he inherited, we'll get to that in a second. And a 16% reduction in factory construction. Everything you hear from his mouth is literally made up in this respect. The impact in California, the war, impact across this country is self-evident. 18% increase in energy, 21% increase in the cost of you flying up here from LA or wherever you flew in from. You're seeing that reflected. It's just starting to absorb through the economy. You've seen what's happened to gas, 52% increase. Interestingly, cost of a gallon of gas in the state of California is up about $1 as of this morning, $1.51. Nationwide, it's actually higher at $1.55. There's actually 33, this is updated talking points, often not provided by WISPA, 33 states actually have seen higher increase in gas prices. 47 states have seen a higher percentage increase in their gas prices in the state of California. Happy to validate that, happy to remind you of that if someone wants to talk about the issue of gas and gas prices in the state of California. 151, national average 155, 33 states with higher increases in gas prices. But Donald Trump has increased the cost of gasoline by 52% since this war in Iran. And this is the remarkable thing. This is what he inherited. Day one, he got in, we had GDP growth, which was, quote unquote, the envy of the world. Headlines, economists, others. Now we see GDP growth contracting. Well, at least it's fallen from that growth, 2.8%. We've seen U.S. inflation. You saw the 3.8% numbers just came out 2 days ago. Highest it's been in 3 years, and unemployment has gone up since Donald Trump. All of this impacting the state of California. These are the headwinds. Many parts, one body. California connected to the crisis of leadership in Washington, D.C. in a disproportionate, in a profound way. Again, because we dominate in every critical sector of the economy. So we're impacted disproportionately by definition. I think this is the only way to define the leadership of not just Donald Trump, but Scott Bessent. Every day is a no-brainer. The recklessness is outside. This is serious business. And I think this captures, in so many respects, the remarkable work that these two have done and the impacts had on American people and the economy since they got into office. But that's not all. I'm getting to the budget. All of this is directly related to the budget. We now are experiencing massive new cuts. Every state in the country. Many of those, but perhaps the most outsized, come from the impacts of that big, beautiful bill, H.R. 1, to be fair. The most expensive legislation in U.S. history. It raises the federal debt, as you know, CBO's estimate, by $3.4 trillion. Higher debt, not necessarily going to experience lower interest rates, higher costs to consumers. $3.4 trillion increase, the most expensive legislation in history. That also cuts to pay for tax cuts for people who didn't ask for them or need them. 1.3 million Americans that happen to live in our state that will lose their health care, and 336,000 that likely will no longer be able to access fresh and readily available food. $1.5 billion increase, we estimate, in this year's budget, and another close to $300 million associated with CalFresh, costs, health, and food associated with the cuts from H.R. 1. And this is a slide that not a governor in the country that's not showing a similar version of what the Trump and Bessent administration have done. So that's the backdrop of this year's May revise. Just the facts. Just the facts. So where are we? Well, we got a detailed plan, and we're cutting deficits. But we're not cutting corners. We're maintaining our values, and we're doing so in a balanced way. The budget we are submitting for the 2026-2027 fiscal year is balanced, and it includes about $250 billion in general fund and about $250 billion overall in investments. So $246.6 billion general fund and $349.9 billion of investments overall. It projects, because of the big three, back to California dominating revenue, beyond what we had projected in January, north of $16.5 billion. These numbers are very fluid, but the positive revenue is self-evident. It's been reflected in some of the LAO's own estimates, but it's reflected in this budget through just, again, the contributions from the big three of over $16.5 billion. Interestingly, to put it in perspective, they're referencing the LAO, since their November estimate, it's $56.3 billion more than they had originally estimated just in November. That's just a few months ago. It shows the nature of the economy in this state, the nature of that growth engine. It's a rather extraordinary number. There's ideas of what we can do with it. This is one of them, but perhaps, I know we're celebrating the 175th anniversary. It's a patriotic, perhaps, investment to make. But maybe we should be a little more cautious, considering the volatility that defines our revenue structure and streams. And this is a familiar slide. Those of you who've been around certainly had it on your bingo card. And what you'll see there is basically the economy, the yellow line in the center. The numbers matter, but I think the chart in the orange line basically sums it up. You can see this EKG chart, which is the volatility of our revenue and how it spikes from year to year. It collapses. When the nation gets a cold, we get the flu. And so the issue around volatility has to be fundamentally addressed. And we're looking forward to this year. We've had some very positive conversations. The most, I think, significant conversations, certainly the most advanced, on reforming Proposition 2 and doubling our set aside from that 10% to 20%. That is a reform that is long overdue, needs to happen so we can capture more revenue. Remember, 3 major IPOs later, projected this year alone. 3 of them, all 3, one thing in common, they're all California startups that now are dominant businesses. SpaceX still dominantly California-based, and obviously Anthropic and OpenAI. That volatility will only increase as we move forward in the calendar year and likely into the new year as well. Where does the money go? Where are we making the investments in the budget? Well, you can see here under the formula, under Prop 98, and our ongoing commitment beyond 98 to education, significant increases in our TK through 12 education funding. Put that in perspective. When I got here, we were about $17,000 per pupil. Now it's over $28,000. $28,282 per student, 66% increase in investments in per pupil funding in the state. Just on 98 alone, you see a 79, almost 80% increase in investments, $11,698 to $21,013 per student. Those are remarkable slides and significant for what they ultimately mean. And here's what they mean to people that need it the most. This year, we're going to announce the largest investment in special education in California's history. I don't know that many other states can lay claim to this kind of investment, maybe in American history at a subnational level. $2.4 billion more we're going to invest in special education, 43% increase just over one calendar year period. It's an area that matters to all of us. It's an area that has continued to be anxiety-inducing because we meet with parents that they're demanding more, and we've heard that call, and I'm very proud to submit this proposal to the legislature as a significant contribution to addressing the needs of those with physical and mental challenges. As it relates to the investments in teachers, the most important investments we can make in terms of improving test scores and outcomes. We are building on what was a significant increase in contribution in the January budget with a $2.8 billion block grant, which would focus on professional development, focus on retention and recruitment. And we are significantly increasing it to $5 billion in this budget. Another major investment to help with our retention strategies and to focus on high-dose tutoring, to focus on expanding our career pathways, but foundational in our professional development. We also recognize if you're going to focus on recruitment and retention, you got to be pragmatic as well and address the needs for young women. And that's why we are going to promote and propose and have proposed a 14-week paid pregnancy leave program statewide for all our TK through 12, as well as community college employees, which is not insignificant. And we hope the legislature will look favorably on this proposal. 4.31%, super COLA this year. There's a statutory COLA of about 2.87%. This trues it up 1.5 times larger than is legally required. So this slide always, under the local control funding formula, is always one that gets some attention. I've never seen things in the 4 range, and so 4.31%. This should be very good news for many of the districts and many of our schools throughout California. We're also investing, and this is good news. Over the last 7 years, we've invested about $715 million on literacy, which has been at a decent pace. We put out a lot of new literacy strategies and programs. We're seeing real results, and we just want to take it to the next level. And so $715 million over 7 years, $440 million in this budget, investing in literacy coaches and specialists. We want to go deep and wide and now really build on this new framework and our new strategy that we announced over a year ago and have spent years and years developing. You're seeing the benefits across the spectrum. We were down in LA unified, and every single cohort, every single grade has seen significant improvements, higher improvements for Latino community and the Black community, interestingly. But statewide, you're starting to see significant increases in gains in math, science, and English language art compared to prior years. We want to continue this steady progress. And what's that steady progress built on? Created that brand new grade, TK for All. Didn't exist a few years ago. Fully funded it, saving upwards of $17,000, $18,000 a year for families. You talk about an affordability agenda, just that alone. The investments were made in community schools. We dominate the nation in community schools. By the way, this budget includes an additional $1 billion for community schools. In January, it was $485. We're truing it up with an additional $1 billion in the May revise, $1.485 billion investment to build on our community school model. We have After School for All. It was promoted in prior administrations. It was modestly funded. We've expanded it at scale, After School for All, as well as Summer School for All, 30 days, 9-hour school days in the after school. All of that is maintained. Those investments continue in this year's budget. And of course, we were the first in the nation to do two free school meals with no stigma, no shame. First state in the country to do that. We maintain those investments as well across the spectrum of supports. But the professional development, what we're doing in community schools and what we're doing as it relates to those with special needs, I think really distinguish themselves in the May revise over the January budget. So the question is then, what about higher ed? Talk about this conveyor belt for talent, getting the best and the brightest, first-round draft choices from around the rest of the world. We talk about that formula for success, R&D, that human resources, human capital. How do you convey that? If you're not recruiting that, how do you create that? Well, it's our extraordinary system of higher education. A number of years ago, we created these compacts. I was a little frustrated serving as lieutenant governor, watching the lack of investment, or at least the volatility of investment at the CSUs, UCs, made it difficult to plan. Frustrated as well that we didn't have enough numeric goals. We weren't focused enough on outcomes. We didn't even have a statewide graduation goal. And we established that first time. People talk about updating the master plan. This was our version of that, but just in pragmatic ways. Instead of being 684 pages of beautiful prose, we said, no, what does it really represent? And we just walked through. We talked about faster graduation time. We talked about getting more California residents through our systems, CSU and the UC. We talked about improving those graduation rates, time to degree, 4-year, 6-year rates, and focused on connections. What's the workforce going to look like? How can we build? And we did so with UC Degree Plus, which is an extraordinary program, which we're building on this year in the budget. UC Extension, which is another extraordinary program. You talk about modern workforce development strategies to address the anxieties around AI and technology more broadly. Those are the kind of investments. Again, they're all part and parcel of this larger compact structure. We have significantly made investments and improvements in those investments over the course of the last many years, 3.7 to 5.4 billion, a 46% increase just at the UCs. And in this budget, the UC budget is $254.3 million more than last year, 254.3. At the CSU, which has also seen about a 50% increase in investments over the years, it's $264.8 million more than last year. It represents about a 5% base increase. Along the lines of the commitment we made in the compact, we're fulfilling our part of the bargain, but so are the UCs and CSUs. Record enrollment this last year, which is not insignificant. You see more students graduating without debt. By the way, 65% of all CSU and UC graduates graduate debt-free. I'll repeat that because higher education gets a bad rap in other states. But UC and CSU distinguish themselves in this state. 65% of UC graduates and CSU graduates graduate debt-free. You can see even more are graduating debt-free because of the compacts and the commitments, the dual enrollment numbers, which are also part of our compact. And as it relates to enrollment, this is important. Just shy of 19,000 more Californians graduating since the compacts from the CSU, and 14,774. For some reason, I remember that as of at least this morning, 14,774 more Californians at the UC. So we significantly increased investments, and in return asked for more California residents to get the benefit of their tax dollars and those investments. And we've seen the benefit of that. A lot more work to do, but real progress in this space. And again, this is what distinguishes the game we play from the game played elsewhere. That research and development, the institutions of higher learning, this three-legged stool, the community college, next level, quality comes out of the community college system, the CSU, the backbone of the Pell system in this country, and obviously the UCs as it relates to research. And by the way, forgive me for not referencing the obvious. Trump tried to take $584 million, 800 grants from UCLA. We had to fight that back. $584 million, 800 grants with NIH grants at UCLA. Again, dumb as we want to be. I won't say Dumb and Dumber. We're also not being as dumb as we were in the past. We're not just investing in the present, we're investing in the future. We're paying down long-term obligations. And I just wanted to true this up because I think it's important. This budget year, we're projecting $3.6 billion, proposing to pay down our unfunded liabilities. You look at the next 4 years, including the 3.6, it's about $13.1 billion. And over the last 7 years, it's about $15.4 billion that's been paid down. And that's important. And we've always had, you've seen all these May revises, we've highlighted this as an important part of our long-term fiscal health. And that begs the question, how's CalPERS doing compared to where we were? You've seen almost just shy of 44% growth at CalPERS in the total funding. You've seen an increase in the funded liability. By the way, at CalPERS, we adjusted the discount rate down, which was important. So these are real numbers from the old 7%. STRS, they stayed at 7%. It's a different conversation, but they slightly outperformed CalPERS as it relates to how the fund's doing, 77.5% funded. We still have a lot more work to do, but we're substantially in better fiscal health than we were 7-8 years ago as it relates to our unfunded liabilities. And I say all this because it needs to be said, because if we're not saying it, I assure you, folks out there with the derangement syndrome aren't saying it. And that's why the bond ratings have validated it. It's one thing to say it. It's another to have it validated. It's not just the pension pay downs that is reflected in the bond ratings. It's across the spectrum that the bond ratings have improved. And you've seen the bond rating improvement since 2018 in Moody's and Fitch. So it's a responsible budget from our perspective, and one that familiar that represents broadly our values. And again, we have work to do, and we're going to get to that in those out years. And how do you balance a budget with all that volatility and all that uncertainty in Washington, D.C., with those direct cuts that exacerbate the challenges in a state that prides itself on abundance and a mindset and support as a core value of those most in need. So again, balanced budget that we're submitting in 26, 27, and a balanced budget in 27, 28. This is a 2-year budget. I'm not just trying to get out of Dodge and enjoy 6 months of the next governor saying, well, I left you a balanced budget. This is a balanced budget structurally for the next 18 months after I'm gone. After I'm gone. And I think that's important. I want to underscore that. So we are balancing not just for the next fiscal year, which ends July of next year, but we're balancing for another year in the proposal that I'm submitting to the legislature. Structural deficit through July of 2028 actually has an SFEU, as we refer to it, in 2028 of $2.1 billion. The SFEU this year, you can talk to them about that, is $4.5 billion. I know if I haven't lost you, you certainly are not paying attention. On the revenue side, we've thought a lot about this. So how do we do that? How do you balance for a couple of years with this volatility? Obviously, the revenues are nice, but the dominant, when no one's naive, you don't have to, don't waste time asking the obvious question. Well, these are one-time, I'm well aware. One-time revenues, back to the volatility, capturing that, making sure that we're not investing in ongoing programs with one-time money. And that's, by the way, reflected in these budgets, this year's budget and next year's budget. No big, new, ongoing investments. We can't afford to do that right now. We need to tighten that belt, and we need to focus, and I'll get to efficiencies and outcomes. But on the revenue side, there are areas where we think it's long overdue to make some adjustments. The MCO is a familiar one to many of you. And so we've got an MCO proposal. It's about $4.5 billion over the window and 2.5, or 4.5 in the short term, 2.5 in the medium term in terms of revenue generation. We also have been looking at all our tax credit programs. And we're looking at how many large corporations, and I don't begrudge success, but as a small business guy, paying some generous taxes, and a lot of these tax credits for some of these larger businesses, they don't pay any taxes. Well, they do. They pay the annual LLC or S Corp tax, which is $800, which is pretty remarkable. Some of the biggest brand name companies in the world, their corporate tax is the same as my little wine store on Greenwich and Fillmore. Sorry, I may have broken my pledge not to promote it. By the way, on that, we're going to cut the LLC S Corp tax, that annual $800 tax, for an estimated 250,000 businesses down to $400. That's also proposed in this budget, helping support startups, small businesses, and then try to level the playing field with big corporations by simply capping the tax at $5 million or 50% of their liability. I mean, some folks are never going to pay taxes for years and years and years, and they're just hoarding these tax credits. So we're going to put a little cap on that, and that's reflected in that second line. That's about $850 to $1.7 billion. Year one, year two of new revenue. Digital software. I was slow to this, full disclosure. I was not fully absorbing how many other states had moved with a different state of mind. Someone that lives near a Best Buy, I'm at Best Buy often. And I'm paying sales tax on a lot of this pre-written software. And then I find out all my friends that aren't near a Best Buy, they're downloading it and they're not paying sales tax. And they go, well, how is that fair? And it turns out most other states don't think it's fair. In fact, there are 45 states that collect sales taxes in the United States. 35 of those 45 already do this. We haven't. So we're going to start to do that. Same with SaaS, the sort of business-to-business side of things. So we're going to do both those, and we estimate by doing that. By the way, 75% of those transactions we estimate are business-to-business. 75%. That's why we're not doing streaming. Can argue, maybe legislature has a different idea. We're really sort of focusing on the B2B side of things. We're about 75% of those transactions. But this generates, in terms of expanding that tax base, along the lines of those 35 other states, particularly on the pre-written software side, and on the SaaS side, it's about 24. The estimated revenue in the 900-ish range for the state, a little higher, and about 1.1 billion, this is important, for the cities and counties. A new revenue stream to support cities and counties, because invariably you're going to ask, what about the cities and counties? That would significantly help advance some of their structural and ongoing issues and challenges with HR 1, et cetera. So this is something, candidly, rightfully, you could suggest we could have done a year or two prior, but I think now it's an appropriate time to promote it. We're also looking to reduce costs, and this is where we get into the more challenging issues. But when you think of the totality of what we're addressing, by the way, not just a 2-year budget, we will be cutting in half those 2, 3, 4-year out year deficits, cutting them in half, more than half. So you got, again, everyone has to update all their little, we're always a little off anyway, but that's just me being a little hypercritical. We're going to make some adjustments. Some of these are familiar. Utilization management issues, about $100 million. Reinstate medical asset test, it's anywhere from 500 to 540. We continue to debate this, but these are the experts, and they're going to say 500. I say 540. And then on the $20 premium for the UIS population, that's basically, you recall we had 100. Legislature went down to 30. We're promoting to get back to 20, which puts it about $50 a month, which from my perspective is fair for this reason, because if the average person on covered California, the average, none of us live in the average, so I get it, but the average is $206 a month in premium on covered California. If you make just $1 more and you're no longer eligible for Medi-Cal, you will pay $46 a month at covered California. And that's where the number came. If you're going to pay $46 a month for, I think, our expansion population, paying $50 seems to me a fair thing to do under the circumstances, particularly since we invest 100% of the dollar in that population. But I understand and respect good people have different points of view. And before you ask me about this, I'll give you the answer, and you can write it down now or I can repeat it. We look forward to engaging the legislature, as we do every year, in every one of these proposals. And we always maintain an open hand, not a closed fist, strong opinions. We have red lines. But in terms of addressing the structural deficit, finding balance, common ground, we continue in that mindset to be open to argument and interested in whatever new evidence they may provide. So those are the three. There are dozens and dozens of smaller items, but these are the three big items. It's about $427 million on that first line item, the 500 or 540 on the second line item, about $100 million ongoing on the utilization management, gets into CalAIM, et cetera, things like that. We're also reducing expenditures across the spectrum, 1.5 billion. By the way, the general fund from January to May is down. One of you may have picked this up if you had your old notes. Down by $1.8 billion from where we projected the general fund to be in May. So we reduced that projection in the May revised down $1.8 billion. This is separate and above a broader issue of reducing the cost of government. I continue to remind you, before Doge, we were Doge before Doge. I just didn't do it with a chainsaw and invite some foreign leader, fortunately. But we did initiate something called effective, engaged, and efficient years and years ago. We created ODI, the Office of Digital Innovation, and created a consciousness in this area. And I keep highlighting it because it needs to be highlighted. We've reduced vacant positions. We're creating ongoing savings. We've, by the way, just on the vacant positions, I love all my friends. You know, you really need to focus on being more efficient, and you have too many employees. I get all this lecture. All my friends watching Hannity. And I'm like, what, you talking about us, or are you talking about the folks you're out there promoting and sanitizing every single day? We're 36 in the nation in number of state employees and local employees. 36. Look who's in the top. 11 of the top 15 are all red states. So you may want to, again, back to updating the talking point. Folks in Wyoming, I think half the damn population. I think it's 10%, but just take a look at that slide. Again, I'm just trying to help everybody with the facts and updating your talking points, or at least putting things in context and perspective. We'll take our fair share. But I'm a little old-fashioned about this notion of honesty, transparency, and fairness. We have more work to do in this space, and that was reflected in this slide. And we'll continue to focus on efficiencies, which was reflected in this slide. And we'll continue to advance them, which is reflected in this slide. More civil service reforms, more focus on digitizing state services and travel and printing, all of these things, consolidation of many of our offices as we come back to work. That's been an enjoyable process for the two people that paid attention there that have been burdened by this. We're going to continue as well with new initiatives, building on, again, Harvard Business Review said it. Nation-leading efforts at DMV. Don't, again, kill the messengers. It's Harvard Business Review, celebrating some of the progress at DMV. I'll remind you where we started with the DMV. But they're doing, I think, a wonderful job out there, and they've still a lot more work to do. They would acknowledge that. But you see the reforms, and constant reforms on hiring, and we've got this breakthrough initiatives. We've got so many fun and exciting things that are happening, at least fun for us that are into OKRs and that are into the management side of the ledger. But those new efforts continue, and a number of them are novel that just went into effect, and a number of them that are about to go into effect. About $850 million is projected in this budget of lower costs. And by the way, just in two sectors, not just represented in the last slide, about 350, though you say 350, I'm at 360. We're a little off on some of these back and forth as it relates to CDCR reforms. We went out, got some consultancy work done, really looked at how we can stress test and improve our operations. And you could see the examples of pharmacy rebates, admin costs, consolidating contracts. So it's represented about 350 at CDCR and about 500 million in health broadly defined across the spectrum of supports along the same lines. So over the course of the last year and a half, we brought folks in, take a third-party look at how we could be more effective and efficient across agencies and departments. The first down payment on those investments are reflected in terms of savings in this May revise. So I can revise your memory. We have all this online because you're listening to me, and you may roll your eyes and say, well, that sounds good, but how do I know you're not lying? You can go to results.ca.gov. Learn more about many of the proposals and programs that we have in place and stress test them. And I just wanted to take advantage of your attention and remind you that we created that platform, that site, many years ago. And speaking of years, it's been many years, decades, in fact, that we've made the kind of investments we're making in infrastructure. And this is something else. People say, well, where did the money go? I'm like, wait, $42 billion, just as an example, in infrastructure. Oh, I didn't know that. Why don't I know that? Well, because maybe what you're reading or where you're getting your news. I'm going to make that easier in a second. But $109 billion at work today. The biggest investments, arguably even in adjusted dollars. I don't want to say eat your heart out, Pat Brown, because that may come back and bite me. But we talk about the black and white movie days, the good old days when we were making bold investments and focusing on clean, all these broadband in schools. Well, that era is alive and well. $109 billion, $180 billion, 10-year plan. And you say, well, that's good, but how do I know? Again, you're telling the truth. Go to build.ca.gov. And this is a great site. It's actually, I love doing it. Every time I show up in a community, I'll go in because it's geographic, it's geofenced, and you can look at the exact projects in your community. You can see if they're over budget, under budget, see who's performing, who's not. We've done a lot of CEQA streamlining in this space to improve the efficiency and outcomes and time to delivery on these projects. Can't make up for 100 years, but we've done some very significant things. You obviously note that from the Darden project, that a $5 billion, 2,300 megawatt project, the battery storage solar project, and obviously sites to Advantage. I think the sites was 148 days on a 270-day judicial review. Again, part of the streamlining. Many other projects in that space. Build.ca.gov lays all of that out. Briefly, I want to talk about building in the context of rebuilding because I'm deeply mindful. The mayor was just up here, Bass and others yesterday. The ongoing focus, and its focus, laser focus on getting one of the most spectacular parts of the country rebuilt, in Altadena, Palisades, and getting LA City and County back on their feet to put their best face forward with the World Cup, obviously, and the Olympics in 2028. So those are all the things we have done, dozens and dozens of executive orders. If there's something to waive, we've waived it. The permitting side, et cetera. But we're focused now on how we can do what, frankly, the Trump administration has not done. It's what is it, May 2026. Fires occurred last January, nothing. So the gap now, the issue in Los Angeles is really around that gap between what insurance is paying, more accountability there, and costs. Costs of construction obviously have gone up because of Trump and Trumpism and Besson's policies, tariffs, and all the taxes they've imposed as it relates to the workforce, scarcity, et cetera. So we created a program, and the reason I'm highlighting this is it's been a big success. This is the CalAssist program we created a year-ish ago. Updated some eligibility requirements, and there was an iterative process. In that iterative process, we landed about $281,000, which is about 200, I think AMI, 200% of AMI, area median income. So a family earning up to $281,000 can get a grant, not a loan, of up to $100,000 for 12 months to address their mortgage needs. And we just crossed the threshold. Over 1,000 families have taken advantage of this. They thought it was too good to be true. It's been a wonderful success. And we wanted to build on that. And so because of the absence of support at the federal level, I'll be in D.C. again Monday or Tuesday, continuing to do what I can. And by the way, it's bipartisan. Our California congressional delegation's been nothing but great. Every Republican, not just Democrat, have had the backs of the people in Altadena and Palisades. There's just one individual who's not. And so we will continue to thank their leadership. Lee Zeldin's been great. I hope I didn't get him fired. And we just do what we can to keep moving forward here. But in the absence of that, we're proposing to the legislature a new $100 million fund. This to address, again, that gap that I just referenced further, not just mortgage assistance, but rebuilding assistance to unlock financing, to get to buy down because of the guarantee interest rates, and to get interest rates as low as 2%, a little bit higher. There's a lot of financial institutions that will participate in this, but we've set aside $100 million in the budget specifically for this, $56 million new general fund, some other money and settlement funds, and rolled this together in a new proposal that we believe, along the lines of the CalAssist proposal, can have a real impact, helping real people in the construction phase address the anxieties they have. A lot of people with permits, but they're not moving yet because of that gap. We believe this can substantially help them, but something else needs to help. And I'm very proud of our team and the work they did on the issue of impact fees. Look, California's increased since 2009 by 57%. We've reduced the timeline to getting permits for housing. 57% since 2019. We've increased the number of housing production since 2019 by 59%. I didn't bother you with a slide on this. I wish I did in hindsight now. 59% increase. And in the May revise, we've revised the estimated number of new housing units from January because we're finally seeing the benefits of all these reforms, which have been pretty impactful and broad. And so with that now, we're thinking, what's the next phase? It's the impact fee place. There's a lot of complexities in the impact fee, and we can get into a larger conversation about that if you wish. But one area that we think can target sort of a down payment in terms of creating a different relationship with cities and counties and developers is slashing impact fees for state-funded projects. If you want the state money, no impact fees. What's happening is locals are pocketing the state money by taking fees on these projects, in essence. And we also have different criteria incentives related to impact fees as it relates to incentivizing local government not to impose them broadly so that they are actually more likely to be eligible on the scoring side for competitive state grants. So it's a combination of both and with this proposal. So as we're rebuilding, creating more assistance, we're trying to do it in a way where we address the stacking of thousands, tens of thousands in some case, dollars of fees on these projects. And we believe conservatively, we put that 10,000 number, that this could reduce the cost of new construction by that equivalent amount. Accountability is the name of the game. And that accountability, we're driving $500 million on the HAP that the legislature wants to discuss going further. I just put out $35.7 million a couple days ago on HAP 6. There's still tens of millions that haven't been spent on the prior HAP. To the extent legislature has different thoughts, we'll discuss that over the course of the next few weeks. But one thing that I'm resolute on is no more money unless you have a local match. What's happening, I've seen it. Dare I admit, as mayor, I did it. When the state comes in, it means I can walk away, take that money, put it into something else. This state has come in significantly with homeless money. I just want some skin in the game. I think it's the only right thing to do. You should not be just taking ours and then solving other problems. You got to stay in with us. We want it to be additive. So this notion of a local match is something that we want to include in criteria for additional homeless money. And you got to have a pro-housing designation. It's a housing crisis, for Christ's sake. It's what it is. It's Econ 101, supply-demand imbalance. Affordability crisis, the original sin in California. We talked about it for decades and decades and decades. They're connected, directly connected. So if you're not going to be pro-housing, then we're not going to be pro-support of the reason you have a particular challenge. You got to be part of the solution. So that's the stronger accountability that also we want to drive. And I'll just remind you, almost 10% decrease. Again, folks need to update their talking points with California derangement syndrome. For the first time in a decade and a half, almost 2 decades, we've seen almost double-digit decline in unsheltered homeless. Cities are doing their job more increasingly. Mayor of SF just announced even more significant numbers that are not included in the 9.5%. Mayor Bass, much higher than that as well. So not fast enough, but progress, this flywheel. And part of that progress is reflected in all of the support we provided that is also available on this website, accountability.ca.gov. You should go to it. If you want to know when your uncle comes over and says, what the hell is going on in California? Go to this website. Say, Uncle Rick, go to this website with me. Why am I going to a goddamn website? Sick and tired of you. But encourage them. And you're going to see, at cities and counties, who's got a green, yellow, or red, sign next to them. Who's performing, who's not. Who's moving forward with SB 43 and conservatorship reform? Who's moving forward with the Care Corps program? Who's moving forward as it relates to pro-housing designation? Who's moving forward with their arena goals? Who's moving forward with the local housing element? Who's moving forward as it relates to meeting their goals under Proposition 1 and the $6.38 billion of investment we're making? Who's moving forward when we're going to add on July 1st the Mental Health Service Act money and the reforms to focus on close to $1 billion a year in new housing? Who's actually producing results? And what are the numerics as it relates to reduction in homelessness? Accountability.ca.gov. Great website, updated consistently, and I made sure it was updated last night. So it's ready for all of you. And what's also up, not just the website last night, is our reserves compared to 2019. I think this is important because we've had the good days, bad days, we've had to pull the reserves. But at the same time, we've always been mindful that we just can't rely on that. Got to keep replenishing them. So the reserves in this year's budget, $29.9 billion in total reserves, and then this reserve surplus account, which we created 2 years ago, which you may recall in hour 3 of that January presentation, which we call the Erica account because of her brilliance. She calls it the Erica account. And on account of her, we have an extra $10 billion in the surplus account. So total surplus in the state's roughly $40 billion that we go in to the next fiscal year, which, we want to see that go up. We want to see, whatever happens with the capital gains. And again, this is a capital gains story in California. That's $16.5 billion, the big three, disproportionately representing the capital gains. We want to capture that, keep capturing, paying down that debt. By the way, that $39.64 billion also includes that $10.3 billion in Prop 98. So the schools have a $10.3 billion surplus as well, which again is not to be drawn down for ongoing purposes, is there as needed. And that's in addition to all those other big investments that we mentioned. So look, if there's nothing else, and there may be nothing else you remember, just please remember this. California's structural deficit, on the basis of the proposal we're making to the legislature, through July of 2028, it is currently May of 2026, is zero. The deficits beyond that, which, by the way, in every state, they have deficits beyond that. Most states, just look up any state, year 4, 5, 6, are cut in half, more than half. Number of cases, single digits. And so it's important, again, that I remind you what I have reminded all of you of for the last year, that we're not going to walk away from this state and put the next legislature and the next governor in a difficult spot. And we've made tremendous investments, proud of those investments. If you're against child care, respectfully, we're for it. If I believe in health care for all, I promoted it, believe in it, despite some caps, we've done as much or more than any other state in the country. I think we got down to 6.4% on uninsured. And I think they were at the same time, Texas was at 16.7% uninsured. Just put that in perspective. That's not a stat. That's like life-saving medicine, people's lives saved. Struggling with the HR 1 cuts. But bottom line is we will have July 2028, $2.1 billion SFEU. We're going to enjoy $4.5 billion SFEU in the current budget. And we believe that the next governor and legislature will be in a very good space. And I imagine it'll be much better than this. I think you may add some numbers in front of this as a surplus with what's coming down the pike in the next few months as it relates to potential revenue. But Prop 2 needs to be reformed. We need to capture that and not spend that. So that's the May revise. There's hundreds of line items, and that's why I brought, Claude and Chat. And they'll walk you through. These are the updated models. I would be more perplexity, perhaps, in this frame. But we're here to answer any questions you guys may have.
Governor, you called on election officials to speed up their counts of ballots. Are you giving them any more money?
Working, in fact, we've had detailed conversations with the legislature, and it was mutually agreed that we would work together over the course of the next month as we balance the budget to land specifically what those investments may look like, and we both agreed on that. So on the basis of that question, no new resources in today's presentation, but absolute full commitment and cooperation with the legislature to land that in the final budget deal. What you're referring to is a letter I put out to all the county registrars to say, get your act together, get these ballots counted. I'm very concerned that if we don't do that, particularly on the basis of the new rules and regulations that we've now implemented, where we're requiring them to do so, I think it will expose us to the accusations that will be exploited by the Trump administration.
You talk about how the big three are responsible for propping up a lot of the money that we're going to see influxing. How do you square that with people clamoring for there to be more regulation on this industry if it supposedly is such a big part of why we're...
Well, the big three in this case is the corporate tax, the income tax, and the capital gains space. But as it relates to the engines of our economic growth, it's not just tech. It's interesting. You go back to that slide on the 40% growth in the GDP since 2019, and there's a great Bloomberg article on this that stress tested it. It's in the healthcare space. It's interesting. The buffer on our investments have actually impacted our GDP growth in a significant way. Our investments in higher education, education broadly, and in technology, it's sort of a three-legged stool in that respect, represented in a lot of the analysis that Bloomberg did in terms of our GDP. Again, which is just dominant. Proud of that. And it's important that we maintain that focus. And that goes to your question, I think, is how we, it's why I have opinions about some of these ballot measures. At the same time, I had opinions. There's many ballot measures that we're going to likely see on initiatives on the ballot. It's why I veto certain legislation. It's represented in all of my budgets, is trying to find that balance. And it's represented in SB 53. And the fact that we worked with Fei Li and Stanford and Carnegie, and worked with Berkeley and MIT, and put out a white paper around regulation. We're the first to regulate large language models and frontier models, the first safety regulation in America, the first to do the big executive order before the Biden administration. And you'll be seeing in the next few days additional announcements in the space as it relates to tech and regulation. You also know my position on 16 and younger, and been very clear on that, and very proud of California's nation-leading efforts to regulate at the same time, not to over-regulate, so we continue to inspire more innovation.
Could you, how does your plan factor in the proposed Air Resources Board regulations? And, with revenue expected to drop, were those regulations to go through? Would you, and how would you, shift those funding priorities?
Well, none of that's going to be factored into this fiscal budget, this year's fiscal budget. It's a draft proposals, and we're working to listen to all the stakeholders as it relates to that, and we'll work with, met with a number of legislative leaders as well on this. The caucuses have informed some of these conversations, already made some adjustments from the original draft at the Air Resources Board, and will continue to, but it doesn't directly impact the presentation that was advanced today.
Lower cost.
Oh, sorry, just real quick. I'll get back.
Governor, I know you admire Bobby Kennedy. He once said, you will have the greatness to bend history itself, but each of us can work to change a small portion of events. You've shaped this balanced budget in California's direction over the last 8 years. In this governor's race, would you agree that an endorsement of a Democratic...
Oh, look at you. That was... He goes right to the heart with Bobby. I take my guard down, and then you try to get me to answer the question I refuse to answer.
Would you agree that this represents one of those moments where you could still change a small portion of it? And you've spoken
Did you have chat do that question for you? That's very sophisticated.
I like mine better. But you've spoken about accountability. Do you think Democrats will hold you accountable for standing by this principled neutrality by withholding your endorsement in this non-possible scenario where two Republicans take the ticket?
Yeah, look, my focus has been making sure that doesn't happen, and I've exercised not just a focus, but I've exercised through some action efforts to encourage that doesn't happen by making my case, and will continue to make my case. I do not see that scenario taking place. I see a lot of good Democrats I've worked with for years and years and years on the ballot making their case. I was in a similar position with a similar stubborn governor that refused to get involved. I developed tremendous animus towards him, and now I offer forgiveness. Yes. We don't dream regretting. We all have agencies. We can shape the future. There's still a lot. Look, I've said this before, so I'll repeat it. I don't anticipate this need to be the case, but there is a break the glass scenario, and there's many people that have a deep understanding of what it would look like if Democrats were locked out, and we're going to do everything to make sure that doesn't happen. I'll leave it at that. Oh, sorry.
Chief of Staff Dana Williamson just pleaded guilty in federal court to 3 counts. What's your reaction to
I just literally, as I was in the elevator, someone mentioned it. So forgive me for not having the opportunity to get into the details of it. We will after I understand exactly what the plea was. But look, it's hard. I just think of her daughter, but also mindful of accountability. We're all got to be held to the letter of the law and accountable. But it's on a personal basis. For her kids, it's tough. But I don't know the details of it, and I'll just leave it at that.
One of the counts, she pled guilty to lying to the FBI, including, and this was in the indictment that came out last year. One of those things was related to her time as your chief of staff. She passed along, she says, information.
That was wrong. Yeah. I mean, if that's one of the things she was ultimately pled guilty, if you do that, that's against the law. We have high ethical standards, and that's just wrong, period.
Governor, here's 3 parts.
Jose, no, I promised I'm going to get yelled at from my San Francisco representative in the back.
On the budget, you talk about belt tightening. Can you give us some examples? This is a very modest growth in general fund compared to years past. Where are we seeing that squeeze? Where are those cuts at?
Well, I mean, look, I imagine you'll get folks that say that, have strong opinions about the asset test, have strong opinions about predeterminations as it relates to utilization management. They'll have strong opinions about aspects of premiums, and folks will have other component concerns that are reflected not in the slides today, but will be reflected in the presentation in a moment from Erica and Joe. And all those, the sum total of all those things sort of add up to, in the short run, $1.2 billion of lower costs. At the same time, we're trying to balance that by being a little more creative on the revenue side, which I think I hopefully effectively highlighted as it relates to digital services that hadn't been considered in the past, and the MCO, which has always been a source of revenue consideration as it relates to supporting healthcare in this state, particularly in light of the cuts from H.R. 1, and that's why cause and effect in that respect is so important and connected. And just the ongoing efficiencies that I highlighted that continue, and I'll continue to advance.
Governor, about a few big city mayors who stood right there where you did, Long Beach, Riverside, Oakland, Stockton, Sacramento, and they were concerned about cuts to IHHP, the seventh round, $500 million, and they were concerned about that because the progress that they have been making as far as homeless programs and the housing. Say your 9 point.
Well, it's not a cut; it's another $500 million. This was never an entitlement. As a former mayor, I can assure you, we never got any support when I was mayor. Not a dollar. This is one of a dozen areas of support. HAP is one of a dozen areas of support across the spectrum, and I would encourage you to go to that website that I highlighted. We'll show you a lot of the new initiatives the state has advanced. I can get into BH Connect at $8 billion. I can get into the $2.9 billion in bridge housing. I can get into the issues of youth mental health at $4.2 billion. I can get to the $6.38 billion on Proposition 1. None of this existed at the scale it existed today. The $500 million is new money. They want $1 billion. I get it. I want accountability. I want results that are visible results. And I think focusing on visible results is really the emphasis I'd like to see. To the extent they can make their case to the legislature that they can find an additional $500 million and not impact the most vulnerable, that's the case they're likely to make. I'm empathetic to the challenges mayors face, but I'm also deeply prideful of the investments this administration has made to have their back and to get us back in the right direction on addressing the crisis of homelessness in the state.
And the issues of SNAP and Medicare, the President of the United States is suing IRS for $10 billion. You know, we got all these other cuts going on. I just want to get your thoughts.
Oh, come on, it's just sick. The graft, the corruption, seeing his son in China, come on. You know, it's sick. He's negotiating against himself to take $10 billion of your money, and there's still people on TV countenancing this every single night. They know who they are. One of them was on the screen earlier. It's a disgrace. Negotiating with himself, $10 billion settlement, $230 million that he wants from the DOJ, not just the $10 billion from the IRS. Do we have to go through the 8 large-scale golf and development deals he's done across the globe? Do you think for a second folks that got off Air Force One yesterday in Beijing don't have an economic agenda for themselves that will enrich members and associates of the Trump family? I mean, in the most benign version of it, how about all those poor souls that put $100 down for the gold cell phone that haven't received it? The sneakers. I'm not even going to World Liberty Financial. I'm not even talking about crypto. I'm not talking about $400 million. Oh, wait, not $400 million Qatari planes. There's another $937 or $950 million in the Pentagon budget to retrofit that. I can go on for another 45 minutes of examples. Witkoff and Kushner's, the Board of Peace, so he can get a piece of the Middle East. I mean, it's this is next level. Lack of accountability on this is extraordinary, and the damage he did. Now back to the budget. These cuts on HR 1. I mean, additional $3.4 trillion to the deficit. That's sacking your kids and grandkids. The cuts, 44,000. By the way, just on the cuts, it's important to note we substantially, because of work we're doing, we're providing resources to the counties. We're addressing some of the work requirement issues. The January to May budget reflects a significantly lower number of people dropping off of our Medi-Cal program. 44,000 goes up to 446. And specifically on the food stamp side, we're still trying to do more there, but we did offer for consideration $30 million for the food banks. Yes. Additional resources. Legislature, I imagine, may want to do even more there. And we continue to go after nation-leading efforts on fraud, 83% reduction in EBT fraud. Even a member of the Trump administration applauded our efforts in that space.
Governor, on kids' mental health, there's the $4.2 billion on CYBHI. This is one of your signature efforts, including $1.3 billion that was spent to help get services, mental health services in schools and help schools be able to bill insurance companies for that. At this point, we're at the end of the 5-year CYBHI period. Only about 1 in 5 of the schools that have signed up have even filed a claim. And there's hundreds of districts that are not participating. 180 have gotten any kind of reimbursement. And we know there's like 2,500 eligible educational agencies. Do you consider this program, specifically also the fee schedule, a success? And what do you propose in this budget in terms of continuing any investments in CYBHI? Well,
it sounds like you got an article you've written, and I'm going to walk myself right into it. So I'm going to take the opportunity to have my team compare and contrast notes on this topic, and I'll get back to you. I think that does justice. I think making investments in wellness, not just physical health, but mental health for our kids is a good investment. I think Saluna has been a great investment. I think the investments we've made to build wellness centers in our public schools has been historic, and I think we have a lot more work to do to deal with the crisis of our time. And on the issue of mental health, no other state in the nation has done more. And to the extent we have to continue to drive these unprecedented investments and drive local accountability, I'm all in the spirit of your question, and look forward to the team getting back, comparing your assessment with our assessment, and then trying to fill any gap of consciousness.
Governor Callahan, please, three-part question for you.
Oh my gosh, well, where's my Cal-Am expert?
Just a quick hit, Governor. Are you sad that you have had to propose cut to such a signature initiative?
Yeah.
Do you plan to submit new 1915 B and 1115 waivers?
Didn't we just do that? Yeah.
They expire at the end of the year.
Yeah.
So,
I just wrote a letter on that.
Are you worried that the Trump administration will say no?
Well, that's a separate question. Yeah, so we did submit. It was a week or but it was a week or so ago. Or,
Did it include community support or ECM?
yeah, so we're working. Look, this administration is not the easiest to work with when it comes to 1332s, 1115s, and all these other waivers, the MCO and issues around hospital quality assurance fees. You saw the impacts on that, which impact our deficit this year. By the way, that's a new impact beyond just the HR1. And there's a lot sitting on their desk. There's the benefit side of this on hearing aids that's sitting on Dr. Oz's desk, has been for a year. He hasn't moved on it. So yeah, I'm concerned about all those things. As it relates to sadness, no, I'm a pragmatist. And it's not just more, it's better. Look, Cal-Am is amazing. It's about whole person care, taking the pilot projects that we inherited in 2018, 2019, putting them at scale across the state, integrating the issues of brain health and physical health, focusing on housing, getting those waivers from the Biden administration, which were profound, and we got those right before he left, and stitching all this together, all these investments, stitching them all together, driving accountability in a state, again, larger than 21 state populations combined. But I'm proud of, I was talking to Dr. Galley about it, to your question, how much progress we did make. I was trying to stress test some of these adjustments, saying, what can we afford to do here? And I think this is where we landed on the utilization side, that we're relatively modest considering the magnitude of investments, the billions and billions that we put in this space. But SAD may not paint that picture. Pride in the investments and hope that those investments can be maintained, and to the extent hope that we have an administration in Washington, D.C. that understands the nation-leading reforms that we're advancing as national best practices, and that the waivers are afforded us.
You are concerned about that, to be clear?
How can you not be with this administration? This is an administration, again, that's negotiating with itself for $10 billion tithing in a settlement with the IRS. This is a different level of corruption. This is someone who said a ballroom's going to cost $150 million. No, then it's $200 million. No, it's $300 million. Then it's 100% paid for by private sector. Now it's $1 billion. This is a guy who said he had a pool guy that did a lot of pool stuff, does a sole source contract, gets it for $1.8 million. Now it's $13.1 million. Just the incompetency at the level and scale, likes of which we've never experienced. The recklessness in terms of destroying an economy that was the envy of the world, hardly perfect. The jobs were booming when he got here. Inflation was cooling. Now inflation's at a 3-year high, 3.8%. I didn't even bring up the PPI numbers just came out. So I'm always concerned, but we'll do our best. I don't have any personal animus with Oz. I've seen him a few times, and including at the White House Correspondents, and it's not that, but he works for someone that's difficult, and I imagine those guys are directed to do certain things that even they know aren't necessarily in the best interest of the American people that happen to be residents of different states, particularly those that tend to have a hue that looks blue.
You said you knew this question was coming on the
Which one?
$50 premiums.
Okay, well, I guess now I
unsatisfactory
walked in
immigration status. You said you believe that is fair, but to be fair, it's not just the premiums, right? It's frozen enrollments for undocumented adults that already started this year. Dental benefits will be restricted starting in July.
Yeah.
They're now being transitioned to fee-for-service coverage, and this backtracking is after historic expandments for
You're
Medi-Cal
answering the
coverage
question.
for Medi-Cal
You were
for
answering.
immigrants in the last years. Obviously, there's huge budgetary pressure from HR1.
Your answer is better than I am.
But what do you say to the immigrants and the advocates who...
That no one in the country has done more and no one has done better to address their anxiety and needs. And the fact that we capped it is in stark contrast to other states that cut those that were already enrolled. We didn't do that. And to the extent that we made that expansion, no one in the country has even come close to the expansion that we still have today because of the historic nature of those investments. Across the spectrum, it's just one of literally dozens and dozens of examples of areas where we support our mixed status families and our undocumented community in ways that we're criticized 24/7 for doing, and will be on the basis of this conversation unquestionably in one of the nightly roundups. So, and I'll defend that the support, and to the extent we are forced to make decisions, that's called reality. It's called math. It's a difficult thing, and we try to do it in a thoughtful way. It was originally $100. They went down to 30, I think 50 under the circumstances, but good people are going to disagree, and the legislature will have their opportunity, and that's what I love, the back and forth. None of these are things I want to do. I'm just trying to find some balance here. I don't want to put it on the back of, there's some other cuts and other programs that I don't want to do either, and developmental, there's a lot of issues. But I'm very proud of the fact we're doing what we're doing. No one comes close. And so, right back here. Right back.
Thanks, Governor. In terms of the withholding of funds for education K to 12 from Prop 98, originally it was $5.6 billion. Now it's down to $3.9 billion. California Teachers Association say they're still very disappointed with that. What do you say to them and everyone else who are struggling to hire? I know you said, look, you're spending a lot, but you're still withholding a lot.
What I say is 4.31%. What I say is $5 billion on professional development. What I say is unprecedented supports in terms of community schools and expansions on after school and before school and summer school, and the work we're doing across the spectrum, the unprecedented investments per pupil that you saw highlighted today. So we made some accommodation to that concern, and I would just have them look at the entire balance sheet and be hard pressed to find an administration over a 7-year period that's invested more in transforming our TK, brand new grade, to 12 education system, and that would be my response to that question.
The costs have gone up, so you say you're spending a lot more, but so have the costs.
And unprecedented historic investments per pupil, investments that are the envy of many other states. I was looking back, forgive me, but in 2010, 2011, we were competing with Utah for the lowest investments in education in the country. I think a year or two ago, we were getting close to in the top 10 with these investments, which again, forgive me, I feel like I must go back because these investments are rather extraordinary. By contrast, maybe it takes too long. Well, hold on, everybody. I'm not going anywhere. You may have a deadline, but this is a short presentation compared to the previous years. So I'm going to take advantage of because I think it's really important. You're looking at scarcity. I'm looking at abundance. I'm looking at $10.3 billion in a reserve. I'm looking at unprecedented investments in education with unprecedented expansions in programs and supports for education and educators. I'm looking at 14 weeks to take care of our workforce and doing that at scale. I'm looking at a super COLA that we didn't need to do. 2.87% was the statutory requirement. I'm looking at massive investments in literacy. I'm listening to our workforce, our administrators, our teachers, what they need, what they want. They wanted this, we delivered it. They wanted this, we went further, because this is what they originally asked for. We went further. So these are pretty healthy investments, and this chart in particular is 80% increase since I've been here in Prop 98 money. I think more than resolves that anxiety.
Employees and the return to office. Is that just the start of negotiations?
No,
Okay.
I want to get it done.
Okay.
Look, change is hard. Change is hard. I'm empathetic. Everybody has unique criteria, circumstances. By the way, we try to accommodate for that. 4 days a week, Nice to see you again. I mean, it'd be nice to see you again. Nice to see you again. Nice to run into you in the hall. Nice to develop a relationship. Nice to not feel so alone. Nice to feel like we're all in this together. Nice to have a different perspective and understanding on the basis of the interaction I just had. Nice to build a sense of team and community. I just think that's important. Most employers do as well. And so while I'm empathetic to change, we've been previewing this for years now, and we want to get it done.
Governor, just taking a big step back, and with this being your last one, do you have any regrets, anything you would do differently between like January of 2019 to today?
Nothing, and not one thing. Maybe a few outfits. I mean, come on, of course. But I regrets in terms of the budget or just in my life. Yeah.
COVID. I mean,
Okay,
the
COVID.
surplus.
Yeah, I
like,
regret
any of
that happened. Yeah. Yeah. No, come on. Look, I'm you know, I think you were at the water event. I'll be doing a series of events, laying out the theory of the case when I got here. That was the first of, I think, a dozen of those, or maybe less. I think I began this by giving you a sense of where we began and where we went. I had a theory of the case. We tried to execute it. Tried to hold ourselves to a higher level of accountability, higher than you hold me to account, in terms of transparency, what we promised, promoted, what we were able to achieve, what we fell short. You know, the struggles that continue to this moment on 1115 waivers, and the challenges of an administration that's back, you know, and the remaining volatility. You know, I said it years ago, and it was stubborn, and the public wasn't with us on the Prop 2 reforms. It would have been great to capture those early on. I would sort of mark, as you framed your question, the consideration of those 2 very abundant years. Then again, we've been able to draw down from those one-time resources over the last many years, which has been a buffer. And I don't think is broadly understood as it should be in the context of how did we get through the last few years of volatility without profound and more consequential cuts. So there are a lot of those things that we could look back, but you have political capital today you didn't have then. You have different legislative leadership, you have different public consciousness and opinion, you have different president, different way, you know. So all those things, you know, I don't tend to wallow in that. But I'm trying to run, I think, just most importantly, because to me, it's not about the rear view, it's about the windshield. It's just, you know, run the 110-yard dash. You know, they'll run me out, you'll run me out of here, and I'm going to still be working until that last damn day next January, and finishing the job, finishing what we committed, fully implementing, addressing that wonderful question on mental health, which I assure you I'm looking forward to answering, and making sure we drive that accountability as we continue to do on homelessness and housing at the local level. Well, that's where my mindset is.
Any advice for whomever might take the podium next?
Counties say they're wholly unprepared to deal
Be
with
shorter in the responses.
Counties say they're wholly unprepared to deal with the impact of HR 1 and accuse your administration of doing to them what the federal government did to them, forcing cuts to sheriff, fire, homelessness. How did you weigh their ask and come to the support you allocated?
And their assertion is that we're making dramatic cuts to their programs.
Sorry, that you're just not.
But it just seems to me a completely different frame. HR 1 made dramatic cuts to programs. They're so, I'm not. I appreciate your reflecting on there. So on the county side, we talked about the $1.1 billion projected revenue that they'll be generating. So I hope they may want to update their question in the context of what they may, unless they just learned about that and said that's nominal or insignificant. I think it's very meaningful in terms of new revenue. As it relates to workload, I think it's $236 million. Was that the number?
262.
See, dyslexia. 262 that we put in the budget, which I hope they are aware of as well, but they may want to consider that support specifically.
For Medi-Cal, there's no 36.
And there's money for CalFresh. So we provided a number of supports that may not have been in evidence when they expressed their concerns. Look, I was a county mayor. I know how this works. And I know it's not easy. It's not easy being a governor. And, Trump hardly has our back. And but the abundance of support we provided to the cities and counties and across the spectrum of issues in the last 4 or 5 years is pretty significant. And to the extent that this will require them to do things differently the next few years, Trump administration, we all are going to have to do things differently. And I'm certainly aware of that and appreciate that requires some change. And as I say, change has its enemies.
Governor Newsom, you are talking about moving undocumented immigrants from managed care to fee-for-service.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to save ultimately over $1 billion a year, it looks like. You are kind of blaming some federal changes on that. Can you expand on that? Because most of these federal changes have not applied to...
Well, fee-for-service is a direct result of the federal government. And that's, I think it's a $1.5 billion, if my recollection serves me.
1.5 billion total fund, 1.2 general fund.
Yeah, so that's the impact. But
is this cost saving, or is this really the federal government is forcing you to do this?
it's federal requirement under the new laws.
Can you expand on that?
I don't know what more I can expand on than that. So to the extent that someone else can unravel it and then come up with $1.2 billion to offset it and litigate it or challenge it. But it's the estimated savings, and Joe is the one that ultimately is accountable for driving this.
Just to quickly, to quickly, the 1.2 billion is the amount of reduced costs from transitioning them from managed care, transitioning this population from managed care to fee for service. We're required to do it because there's a new federal rule that they will not reimburse states for emergency services through risk-based managed care systems. So if we were to keep them in the managed care system, we would not receive the federal reimbursements, which would be a lot more money that the state would lose. And so because of that federal rule, we're required to transfer them to fee-for-service. Same, they would be in full scope Medi-Cal in fee-for-service, so they're not losing Medi-Cal. There are there's two specific CalAIM mentioned earlier, enhanced care management and community supports. That those are the only difference in terms of services that they would not be that wouldn't be part of the fee-for-service model because those are specifically managed care services.
Governor,
Great response.
friends at the LAO reported that
My friends, I like the LAO. I like the fact they were off by $53 billion.
they said spending since 2019 during your tenure has outpaced revenue by about 10%.
Yeah.
Your budget plan here tucks away a lot of this windfall for future years.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're still expecting the structural deficit to persist in 28, 29.
Well, I mean, in 2030, 2040, I mean, yeah. So, but we've eliminated in the next 18 months. We have a 2-year budget. We've addressed the short term, we've addressed the medium term, and to the extent we're single digits in the out years, things are going to radically change in just the next 6 or 9 months. So, look, I mean, you go to fill in a state. They're not, I mean, the ability to sort of for people to solve for 20. The goalpost keeps moving. Now, let's solve for 2036. We solve for not just the year. I could have gotten out of here with a 12-month solution, stacked up. A lot of wins, not had any of these questions about any of these other cuts, and then really socked it to the next administration. But I think this has been balanced in terms of how we've done it with the revenue proposals here that will be ongoing and will help support some of these commitments we've already made going forward into those out years. And we're hopeful with the Democratic administration in 2028. More importantly, perhaps just the ability to push back against these cuts with the Jeffries speakership, that we also may have some better news in terms of the projections that are baked into this budget in terms of cuts that may not materialize because Congress has changed hands. So all those things are the criteria of consideration in those out years. But solving through July of 2028, cutting those longer term concerns by more than half, I don't think is insignificant. I think it's profoundly consequential.
Are you worried at all about your L-word programs that would exist, or whether they would be able to be sustained?
What are the L? What's the L word? You're not allowed to use that word. Unbelievable. I just look. I hope we can continue to make the kind of investments in healthcare. I hope we continue to transform the mental health system. I hope we can continue to make the investments we've made in housing and homelessness and investments in, our 30 by 30. I mean, I don't, this, I'll be out there doing 12 speeches, so you'll hear all about all these investments, and certainly even in the education space. But I did it in partnership with the legislature. So we have partners. I did it in partnership with parents. I did it in partnership with, leaders. And so it has a lot of mothers and fathers. It's not about me. I could have named my Trump accounts, Newsom accounts. Maybe that would have gotten whacked. But there's 5.5 million kids that got those Trump accounts before Trump ever considered it. And so I've tried, outside the ballroom, which I think I deserve. Try not to make it about me and make it about all of us. Sorry, I just got to get to others.
You're still catching up on the details, but today's plea deal and the Dana Williamson case overall is a very big deal. I mean, the latest developments, do you have any concerns that there could be potential implications for yourself and also Javier Becerra as a gubernatorial?
Well, I don't for me at all, period. But, so no. And I can't answer on the basis of another person. Yeah, it's back to, he'll have to answer that. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, what is your position on the California voter ID ballot measure that's going to come before voters in November?
I haven't read it. And I say that because I'm mindful of the SAVE Act, which I read and then realized it wasn't about voter ID. Maybe this one is. SAVE Act was about voter registration. It was about a lot of other issues. So I don't have the benefit of actually having analyzed what it is and what it isn't. So let me defer the response. I will certainly have it every year, as you know. I tend to be very vocal about my positions on ballot initiatives, and I'll certainly be if this one does end up on the ballot.
On the county obligations, one of the...
Oh, no, sorry. Just there's 3 or 4 people haven't spoken. Yeah.
I appreciate that, Governor. So in terms of these limits on corporate tax credits that you're proposing in this May revise, I know Democrats in the state legislature, particularly in the Senate, have floated the idea of imposing a new tax on top-earning corporations. Do you have any reaction to that proposal, or do you see this as an alternative to that, or maybe an alternative to the billionaire's wealth tax that you don't support?
I don't see it in the context of being an alternative or in a reaction. This is what I believe we can do and should do to advance the structural to address structural concerns in our budget and to have a positive SFEU in 2028. So no, I think this is my preferred approach. Legislature as is their responsibility and certainly been their want. They put out some alternative proposals. One of the houses did, not both houses, and they may have others, and we'll dialogue and debate about it. Yeah, it's just anyone who hasn't spoken.
Yes, thank you. Speaking of deferral, CMS yesterday deferred $1.3 billion in Medicaid money to California, which it says the largest deferral they ever done. Are you confident that California will eventually get this money, and are you worried that this could be a beginning of the federal government essentially just withholding all Medicaid money to the state?
Well, it's not the beginning. It's part of the ongoing drama with the Trump administration that again started with UCLA and those 800 grants they tried to cut, the $584 million, the $1 billion, bribe, whatever the heck they're calling it, the fine that they're still trying to advance at UCLA, and the hundreds of billions. I mean, it's over $100 billion of cuts they've tried to take from the state that we've been able to fight back successfully in the courts. So we've been at this 67 lawsuits, at least as of a couple of days ago. I don't know, maybe AG announced another lawsuit today, but we've advanced 67 lawsuits. I don't even think there's been 67 weeks in the administration. All of them in response to these assaults and these attacks. I think it's interesting on IHSS. IHSS is about keeping people out of nursing facilities. Cost of IHSS is roughly about $30,000. By the way, it's been bipartisan. Democrats and Republicans have made the case for in-home support services over the high cost, $137,000 a year, of a SNF, a skilled nursing facility, as an example. That should be celebrated. By the way, it should be also considered and celebrated that California's costs as it relates to SNFs and nursing homes has actually been pretty flat compared to the national average as a consequence of our investments in IHSS. So, yeah, I'm concerned about it, but I'm not surprised. This seems to be a mantra of this administration, the continued advance. There's a few others that haven't asked.
Thanks, Governor. Last year, your administration called back the state's 21 bargaining units representing state employees to reduce employee compensation costs, which included suspending retirement contributions and personal leave programs. Do you plan to call those bargaining units back to the bargaining table, given that the state's in a much better bargaining position now?
Well, on the basis of the presentation today, I don't think we have any additional comments on that. I think we're status quo ante in terms of where we landed in terms of the May revise. So, again, that may be a question for the next administration.
On county obligations, one of the biggest things obviously is health care. The LAO has estimated that because of federal changes, including the Medicaid changes and the ACA subsidy changes, that up to 1 million people in California could try to get back on indigent care programs in California, which existed much more before our expansion of Medi-Cal. Those systems don't get funded by the state anymore. Those systems basically partially don't exist for the most part. What is California supposed to do to account for all of these folks who will lose coverage?
Well, we'll have to work through it. This is what I did as mayor of San Francisco. My responsibility as a mayor to work with the state and local government to get creative. There are a lot of creative local programs and strategies, and as these things unfold, we'll have to meet these things head on. Let me just be specific. We went in January, we had an estimate of the number of people we thought would fall off the rolls. It's substantially lower than we expected because of interventions and strategies. And we continue that mindset. We'll continue to work with the cities and counties, look at best practices, look at strategies as it relates to making people that are eligible, for these workfare programs, make sure they're getting, assigned and making sure they're getting the paperwork done, making sure their application comes back up. They're being supported in that respect as it relates to county adult assistance. I have intimate familiarity there. I did something called Care Not Cash years ago as a mayor that was a radical reform for indigent care, and it's an example of a creative strategy for indigent care that was done at the county level. That's adjacent to your specific question. It's just an example of working with cities and counties to address these issues as they unfold. And we'll continue to keep an open mind in that respect.
I know that the state has branded generic insulin, naloxone. A two-part question.
One more soon.
What is that?
Oh, maybe I should have said that.
Do you argue that the state's generic drug label has been a success? And whatever happened with the manufacturing facility? I thought there was $50 million for that. Has the state abandoned the plan to?
Yeah, we pulled back on that with the legislature last year, and we talked to the legislature about that in last year's budget.
So no more plans to manufacture?
No, we've decided to move forward in this partnership, which we think is more effective and efficient on the biosimilar strategy. We're waiting for that final approval from the feds, and then we'll be able to move forward with the new and expanded program. But so far, look, it was about 6 weeks ago that I got an update on the uptick in terms of people taking advantage of the $11 insulin, and I was very pleased with the results. But that was a number of weeks ago, so we'll keep looking at that, and looking forward to getting that approval finally from the Trump administration, so that we can move forward to this much more expanded program.
What's the next drug?
Yeah, no, that was my mistake. Anyone else who hasn't asked a question? Okay, well, we'll go,
Yeah,
go
can
ahead.
you talk about the Corcoran Honor Farm? Do you see it as a scalable program across CDCR, or is this like a one-time situation?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Look, I'm very proud of the California model, proud of the work we've done across the system. I'm proud that, so this is a component part of all of this. Obviously, San Quentin was the next level version of that, and turning it into a rehabilitation facility, or at least primary focus now. It's on rehabilitation. So they play it by ear. I mean, it's a very awkward thing for me because I'm my last at bat here in terms of the future. But look, every pilot, every one-time opportunity to demonstrate a proposal or a pilot, we hope it's successful, and success leaves clues. And to the extent it can be replicated, that's great. But I just forgive me. There was some. I'm thinking about something else that. Pravda Network did something yesterday in Fox on related topics. Sorry.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
No Prop 36 funding?
Prop 36 it still has money from the $100 million a few years ago. It still has the money from Prop 47, which I think is another $89.1 million in this budget. Still has the ability to attach billions and billions of dollars of new funding that's flooded the zone in all of these other areas that can be used to address the need. I think this is we've been talking about this enough, and those resources still exist from the prior appropriation, which I think says everything you need to know.
Can limit rainy day fund on the November ballot?
Well, I think we got to get the rainy day fund doubled, and to the extent the GAN limit that no one understands what that means or is, and makes it an impediment in terms of trying to get the public to jump up and down and support it. This has been not a regret; it's just a reality over the years. But we're seeing what we can do administratively, legislatively, I should say, and I think we're going to land in a good place. Maybe not, don't make perfect the enemy of good. It's a Voltaire moment, but yeah, we need to, I think, foundationally reform that broader GAN consideration. But in the interim, let's just at least focus on the reserve.
Is public support greater for it now than 2019?
I haven't. I confess, I've been seeing a lot of polling. I haven't seen GAN on the polling list. But we can maybe add it.
More details about how the MCO tax revenue can stay in the billions in the future years, because
I'll let these guys have at it, and they can get into all the details of the new construct on MCO and the new challenges as it relates to the Trump administration.
about that money dipping into the millions, like what's been shared at.
Of course, I'm worried about it. I'm Irish. I worry. Everything. Yeah. Of course. But it's just not, it's all these questions sort of beg the question, and we're not fixed in our mindset. It's about being open. We're constantly, it's absorb, understand, decisions, not conditions, make adjustments, fix things as quickly as you can in real time. It's a way of supplementing. It's the nature of all this. I don't know. Maybe you're glad I'm out of here because I'm just not as rigid in my stress on some of these things. But I'm always, I know one thing, and that is I know what I don't know. And I also know that this administration is challenging. And and I don't think they play by any rules. They make up the rules as they go. And so I worry about that for the future of this state, our nation, the world we're trying to build. And so that's reflected in concerns around anything that has a federal overlay and relationship to the federal government at the moment.
Did you mention Water's Edge tax?
I did not.
Your thoughts on that?
I don't have any for today. Yeah, for today. I have a lot of thoughts, but it's an interesting conversation that I know that candidates for governor, dare I say, opening that door, have discussed, and to the extent legislative leaders want to discuss it, we can have that conversation.
So, Karen's question about your legacy, and in reality, a lot of what I'm thinking about your inauguration and everything you've made a stake on in terms of vulnerable Californians and healthcare and Medicaid and homelessness. You have done a lot of unprecedented investments and really, I think, shifted the
a vision for California in terms of helping the most vulnerable, and a lot of what you have put your stake in is at risk. Does that keep you up at night? Do you worry about that? And how?
No.
I mean, and I'm also wondering if you do run for president, is that something you think you can fix at the federal level?
Yeah, no, look, I can only control what I can control. I can't control what's out of my control. I can try to influence it. I just think a lot, look, back to I said this, to the power of emulation. I do think, if something produces real results, it's going to be hard for folks to unravel it. If it doesn't, it falls short, by definition, it should be augmented and fixed, as I would too. I mean, we push things out, and they didn't work as well as we wanted. We start to adjust and fix and amend, and I hope that that's the mindset for whoever comes in. And to the extent they want to name it themselves or name it, that's, those are things that, I simply can't control. And anyone that tries to control that, I think is left wanting and in therapy.
Jerry Brown also left a huge surplus. Did you?
Was it huge? How big was it? I don't know. Let's check it on that. But in the spirit of Brown, that's the spirit of this slide right there. It's in the spirit of Brown. Yes, in his spirit.
What lessons did you draw?
The spirit of Jerry Brown. I'll say it's reflected in this. I'm serious. Yeah, but we're both Jesuits. I didn't realize I was a Jesuit. Now I realize I am. I'm morphing into them. You're lucky there's term limits, because I could come back at 90 and be like you. But no, absolutely. And I said that from day one. I'm not going to. I thought that was incredibly important. It was part of, dare I say, his legacy. And that was foundational for me. And I made that crystal clear with legislative leaders. And it was stubborn because it was hard. A lot of them, we'll see how they respond. I mean, you'll get everybody to answer, I'm outraged. But, I think it's important. And this slide was important to me. And I made that, I said, this is the red line for us. And I think in many respects, once a mind's stretched, never goes back to its original form. Jerry was one of the first to do that in a long time. In the past, it was just short-termism. It was just get the hell out of Dodge. And that didn't service the state. And so I think it's deeply part of his legacy. And I want it to continue. And we were very indulgent. I mean, I'm not naive about the investments we made. I'm also proud of them, and I want to defend them. And it goes to the prior questions. I think they're important. I thought they were long overdue. I didn't think we were investing in the healthcare space for years and years. I didn't think we were investing in homelessness and housing. We didn't have a strategy. We didn't have a plan. We didn't. And we weren't doing enough for healthcare. We weren't doing enough for families. It's like the diaper thing, you got a guy who needs that math remedial that was lying about how much the diapers, I thought it was important. 2 free meals is important. Preschool for all is important. I thought that needed to be done. And I'm proud of the fact that got done. And I just don't see those things unraveling necessarily. But you can do it without being profligate. And that's the spirit of the slide. No massive general tax increases, tweaks, adjustments. We're not, no fixed mindset. It wasn't someone else's projection that we worked off of. It was an understanding in real time, the changes in our economy, and in Washington D.C. And so I hope that will be the spirit reflected in the next administration, unquestionably. But I hope they can achieve this on their way out.
Governor, what's your reaction to our activities in the country since
this is Jim Crow 2.0. It's sick. Stone cold racism in a scale I never thought I'd see in my lifetime, never have seen in my lifetime. It's all happening, bringing us back to a pre-1960s world. It's jaw-dropping what's happening. It was jaw-dropping what Governor Landry did. He suspended a primary election where tens of thousands of people had already voted. Why? To redistrict 2 districts to eliminate black representation. I can't believe that we're experiencing this. My parents talked to me about this. I said, well, thank God it's not going to happen on my lifetime. And it's happening in real time. Anti-woke is anti-black. All these attacks on DEI, it's anti-black. Level of racism is sick. Rewriting history, censoring historical fact. Number of African Americans have been eliminated from key positions and posts. The Pentagon and elsewhere, it's sick. It's happening in the United States of America in the open. And it needs to be called out. So forgive me for reacting this way. And I feel a deep responsibility to do something about this, and nothing to do with me as governor, just as a human being. This is not why our founding fathers lived and died. It was about the expansion of liberty, expansion of freedom, including more and more people. And we're seeing exactly the opposite take shape under this administration.
and maybe what keeps you up at night. You said that you hope that the state will continue its historic investments in, again, this coverage for undocumented immigrants, but is there any concern that the
I'm
state
concerned
will
about
continue-
that. That's an easy place for people to go. We made significant investments. Yeah, I mean, of course I am. I'll make a case for it. I'm making a case for it. That's why we didn't, we had to deal with reality, deal with the cards that are dealt. We had to slow down that growth, and we did. And but we'll make a case for it. We have universal health care in this country, regardless of pre-existing condition, ability to pay, and regardless of immigration status. We have it. It's called the emergency room. And we're paying on the back end sick care. I believe in universal health care. It was not, I ran on it. I did it as mayor of San Francisco. I ran on it as governor. And so no one could be surprised about my point of view. And I've defended it. And there's a whole cottage industry out there attacking me because of that advocacy. Trying to balance all these concerns as I balance the budget and trying to do it in a way that I think is consistent with my values and the values that we hold dear in this state.
Governor, on that advocacy, you mentioned just now that you did run on single payer when you're running for governor. There's a number of candidates now who are debating it's become quite a big issue in the current Democratic field, of which you have not endorsed. What's your advice for the next governor?
Well, seek first to understand before you're understood. CalRx comes out of our strategies. The first executive order I drafted comes out of our strategies to pursue single payer purchasing. We created a task force. We created a framework and a plan that was just highlighted, created a commission in this space. And we laid out a lot of progress. It's been promoted and discussed here today in terms of advancing the principle. But you have one giant impediment, and that's besides ERISA. You got challenges getting a simple 1115 waiver from the current administration. So I think that may be a bit of a stumbling block. It's not an indictment on a principle. I think single payer is inevitable in this country, period, full stop. The healthcare system is simply devouring the public sector and devouring the private sector budgets. There's no alternative from my perspective. I call total BS on all the fake tinkering that the Republican Party claims or some new idea and proposal that's coming out next week. Donald Trump. For 10 years, he's been talking about that since he came down the escalator. Nothing in this space. I appreciate and applaud what Nancy Pelosi was able to achieve and what President Obama was able to achieve, what President Biden was able to achieve in expanding the support, and what we're doing here in covered California that I think is next level, and what we did to advance even further and beyond. But I do think the system itself is simply, you talk about structural problems, it's an inevitability. So the question is, can a state do it? The state cannot do it alone. It's going to require a level of partnership and largesse of the federal government that is not in evidence, that is not an indictment of the vision, the proposal, the direction that some of the candidates are promoting. I intend to share it. The question is, can you do it? You're going to require, as I said, it cannot happen without the largesse of the American people, Congress, and the president. And by definition, it requires significant waivers and reforms at the federal level. And I assure you, on the basis of the efforts when I was governor, working in the beginning of my administration with then President Donald Trump, who immediately rejected our outreach on many of these waivers. There's a lot of letters I'll remind you of, some that were responded to, some that weren't. And I think it's even more challenging now in that respect. I just think you may want to have if that's the only strategy you have for healthcare, you may want to have a backup plan. That's all. Even though it's the right, I think, and inevitable. It will be inevitable in this country. No question. Question of when, I don't know.
UI debt that the state has to the federal government, any movement? I know you
said
a couple years ago.
I know I'm 0 for 2, and I decided maybe I didn't want to strike out 0 for 3 this year. But look, it's got to be addressed. It's real. It's something we had to deal with during the Schwarzenegger administration, and only comparable example. And we were able to pay it back, claw back over the course of years. we're doing that. I think 668.3 or some odd million in the interest on this, and so it's real. And we've directed. There's some language in the budget specifically to direct our workforce agency on some creative strategies and solutions to address it. I don't want to leave the next governor without those considerations. So there's going to be a series of recommendations and proposals. But at this stage, based upon my conversations yet again with the legislature and the inability, even when we had more resources to move, we just, it's not reflected here in this proposal. And it's incredibly important.
On what you said about redistricting, you said
What about
it's a responsibility to do something.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
have a plan.
Well, I can't solve for everything, but I just want to call it out. I just feel like Prop 50 was a big part of it in terms of pushing back. What happened in the Supreme Court 4-3 decision in Virginia was extraordinary. It was equally extraordinary that Ron DeSantis announced his maps on Fox as a Fox exclusive. Next day, without any real debate, they approved them. Contrast that to Virginia, that went through a very deliberative and transparent and democratic process. What just happened in Tennessee is sick. The governor just did there. What's happening? Landry's doing. What's happening in these other states? So this is, my state of mind is, this is what people in the past rightfully said, well, it's just he's crying wolf. He's overstating all these things. Well, I may have been understating the importance of Prop 50, the importance of pushing back, importance of fighting fire with fire. These guys are ruthless. They're not screwing around. They're, rewriting history, censoring historical facts, and they're bringing us back to the Jim Crow era in terms of African-American representation. It's sick. So we've got to be aggressive. We've got to call it out. I'm surprised it's not more dominant in our national discourse. We're so damn distracted by every true social, and it's understandable. And, all this, understandable outrage. But this is happening on our watch. And so I'm one of and in my watch included, and I feel sense of responsibility to respond as I've responded. Good people can disagree. Maybe, curious people would disagree. I don't know, but most good people would agree, I think. They see their eyes wide open. It's just about power, period, full stop. Speaker Johnson. We'll lose our country. We'll lose our republic. It's 250th anniversary. And I just think this summer, I think it's going to be very busy. And Alabama and Mississippi and in the South. I think a lot of people, there are a lot more freedom rides and a lot of, new generation. I was at Jesse Jackson's funeral. And so, his legacy is alive, and the people that were in that audience that will be out there marching the streets anew. And, and the next civil rights heroes are going to be born at this moment. They need to be, to call out what's happening. And it's not just 2026, it's 2028. And so your question was not that. It was like, do you have, Governor, any specific ideas what to do now in terms of redistricting to address these issues? And the answer is not specifically.
Last question.
Senate Democrats specifically have proposed a fair share contribution plan. Some of the Democrats have also said they're open to
fair share. What's
fair
that?
Share contribution plan. Basically,
Always that sounds good. Fair share is good. What topic?
Are you on board with it? Basically
Which topic?
Requiring on healthcare.
Oh, okay.
Basically requiring some of the major corporations and the state to pay into
I'm satisfied with the proposals. I'm satisfied with the proposals that we laid out today.
You really don't seem like someone who's ready to leave office.
I just want to get. Where's my ballroom again? I just. By the way, this is pretty good. The picture is pretty good.
Are you gonna run for president?
I am no, Gavin. Look at you. Your personal. I'm going to leave you with this slide. Yeah, I need a job. I'm going to need a job. I'm in healthcare. I worry about that. This is why this healthcare conversation is important. Yeah, I'm glad minimum wage is higher under our watch. I like that. That's pretty good. That's good. What do you think? Jerry Brown, eat your heart out. That's all right. Thank you.